So last Sunday we covered the first two chapters, and then today we'll cover the next two chapters, chapters 3 and 4. So what I've been doing in this is most of you have either read the draft or been to a lecture. So I've been trying to do not only kind of church's institutional history, but include people's testimonies, and also like the broader political and cultural currents of the times in the book project that I've been doing. And so chapter 3 is 70s and 80s. And this was a time of kind of the Japan's unprecedented economic growth. After World War II, Japan is in ruins. And between 1950 and 1973, Japanese economy grows by more than 10% every year. I think we've seen Chinese economy grow by more than 10% every year between the 80s and 2000s. And then do you know what happens in 1973? Why the growth slows? Oil shock, yeah. But until then, Japanese economy is booming. And so within a generation from 1950 to 1980, Japan's GDP or GNP multiplies almost 100-fold. And from around 10 billion to 1 trillion. And then the Korean War plays an important role in Japan's growth. Actually, a Japanese prime minister calls the Korean War of 1950 a gift from the gods to Japan. Because it's the wartime kind of the US using Japan as a base that really gets the economy going again. And a historian says such a record of growth over a long period of time has never been seen in economic history. And Japan also becomes the world's, I have a chart about this in the next slide, so you can kind of see the Japanese economy grow. It used to be much smaller than European countries. But it soon takes over the UK, France, and West Germany to become the world's third largest economy. And then once the Soviet Union collapses, it becomes the world's second largest economy until 2010 when China takes over. And then what's also relevant for us is the number of outbound tourists grows exponentially. In 1960, there are only about 100,000 Japanese who go overseas, but this number becomes 1 million by 1970 and 4 million by 1980. And a lot of our members become Japanese who have traveled overseas or travel overseas and stay for a while and then come back. While the economy was growing, like integrating between the US and Japan, the politics could remain tense. In 1959, 1960, and 1970, and this is a picture from 1960, there are a lot of these protests because regarding whether the US should keep its troops in Japan. I mean, it made sense right after World War II that an occupied force would have military troops, but then the US wanted to kind of keep its troops here indefinitely. And there were a lot of Japanese people who were not happy about that. I mean, across the world, France, there were a lot of protests against the Japanese military, against the American military. The Yankees go home, so France no longer has US military presence. But countries like Germany and Japan, I think it's harder for them to get Americans to leave, American troops to leave. But after 1970, these protests kind of subside, and good morning, but this protest does lead to a prime minister resigning, and then President Eisenhower was supposed to be the first sitting U.S. president to visit Japan, but that trip gets canceled because of all these protests. All these protests do contribute to Okinawa returning to Japan in 1972. From after World War II, Okinawa had been under U.S. military occupation. Any questions about what's going on politically, economically during this time? And so the Japan's 1964 Summer Olympics and then the 1970 Osaka Expo kind of becomes Japan's coming out party in the global stage. Now it was a peaceful power, and do you know what this is? Did anybody go to the expo? You were there. Oh, you were there too. Okay, how was
Once.
it? Once?
I was living in a semi-new town.
Okay.
From my balcony, I could see the Tower of the Sun every day. So, I'll be there anytime, and then one more week, they are going to close. So I'll be there only once.
You were there too.
Yeah, I used to visit and I took my boys there.
So this artwork by Taro Okamoto, is that the artist?
He used to live very near from here.
Yeah, he has a museum and a studio
Yes,
here.
yes.
You can still visit. And then he has an artwork in front of UN University also. It's kind of similar to this. But this was like a 70-meter, like a towering structure that was kind of became an icon of the expo. And Kathy Burton Lewis, many of you I think know her.
Yeah.
She has this story of a TUC pastor, like maybe like a half a year into when she and her family, they came as to teach. She came as a Methodist missionary, and about a half a year in, the TUC pastor knocks on her door, and to tell her that somebody donated Shinkansen tickets and the expo tickets for her family. And this was like the soon after Shinkansen opened, also in the 1960s.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that kind of speaks to the generosity that was very present at the church at the time. And for the Olympics, we had the hospitality center to provide refreshments and rest because Olympic Village was Unity Park. That used to be the U.S. military barracks. And for the Olympics, that became the Olympic Village, and then the National Stadium, National Gymnasium. So there are a lot of people coming, athletes and tourists walking by. So we provided a place of rest.
Yeah, Paul was on the Olympic organizing committee.
Yeah.
He was lent from, he was working for Hitachi. He was selling trains.
Selling trains.
Yeah, but he was lent to the Olympic organizing committee. So, and it was interesting. Some of the, well, maybe not, but some disruptions. Yeah. He interfered, and the police presented him with a ticket to buy a suit. Because it was interesting during that time. I got to go and.
Yeah. Julie has given me a lot of stories for the book. Thank you. Yeah. And this was Wally's book regarding Shinkansen, because she was involved. I covered Wally in the last chapter, and yeah, he has a few books about photos he took.
He was in a test run for the Shinkansen.
Yeah, Shinkansen.
Kodamago.
Yeah, I think I rode on one of the first trains that they were testing
Really?
on Shinkansen.
Wow. That's exciting.
But
and then I zoom into a few of the members, John Inagaki being one of them, because I think his life captures kind of these post-war Japanese-American history relations in many ways. He was born in 1948, and Japan was still under U.S. military occupation, 1945 to 52. And John talks about how 3 years before he was born, the Japanese women were sharpening bamboos in case American soldiers land and they were going to fight Americans with these bamboo swords. And then he says how discrimination came in violent and subtle forms. John's mother is Japanese and his father is American. And he's faced a lot of discrimination because he wasn't full Japanese, especially during those post-war years. And he has this like a traumatic experience in his childhood that one day he lived near Japanese government dormitory. And he says one day this man from the dormitory came out and told him to stand in front of a wall and threw rocks at him. And one kind of landed right above his head. And after that, he developed this hatred for Japanese people. And he didn't really want to leave the house, he just stayed at home, went to school. He went to ASIJ, American School in Japan. his first time in Tokyo Union Church was actually Julie, what you do. So with his Cub Scout, Boy Scout leader,
Oh, yeah.
took John to TUC for the first time. Yeah, this would have been, like I say, in the 50s or 60s when he first came here.
And we're still meeting at
You were still meeting?
Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts.
Yeah, but you still take them out and everything. Teach them trees names and bird names, which you should do, all of us. We all need to learn tree names and bird names, I think. So John Inagaki, his first job when he was a high schooler was delivering, TUC used to have pamphlets to ever publicize to hotels downtown. So he had like hop on the train, hop on his bike, go downtown. It was kind of deliverable for us. It was his first job.
Like evangelists.
Yeah.
Like TC evangelists, yeah.
And then he and his wife were baptized in April 1972. And they were married here 2 months later. And then there's like a 10 weeks of marriage counseling every week. So I think we still do it. I don't know if this is involved these days, right? And John says, every time I couldn't take it anymore, I'd come to TUC. It was a sanctuary for me. I talked to the pastor and the Lord spoke to me. The Lord told me to forgive and forget. That's what TUC has done for me. So he went to college, university in the US, worked in the US for a bit, and then came back as an adult to work for a Japanese company. And even though his Japanese is really good, he says he often experienced more subtle forms of discrimination. And so TUC really became a refuge sanctuary for him. And in 2025, he's practicing with UPT now. He plays the guitar. He serves as an usher. He's now a worship and music elder. And he was on the pastor. I think he might have been on your pastoral search committee.
Yes.
Too. And then he still says, I have not done much for the church. The church has done so much for me.
Right.
This John is a saint as one of the others. And Yuriko-san, maybe you can tell your story better. But I think you told me, correct me if I got anything wrong, or feel free to tell your story. You began attending here in the 1970s, and then through a friend you met at the Tokyo American Club, right? And back then, the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of overlapping membership between Tokyo Union Church and
Yeah.
Tokyo American Club.
Mm.
I think they call it like tuck and tag or something.
Oh.
Yeah, they all went together. And so that's a Shinobu-san on the left. And I think this picture was actually from the 60s. And you can see how we have like 4 Sunday worship services.
Oh.
So, I heard Shinobu-san, not just from you, used to be kind of like a bouncer at church. And on Sunday mornings, she'd stand outside. And if the Japanese people come, she would tell them like, you should go to a Japanese church. But you do say that you two somehow eventually became best friends. And but I think you also wanted to go back to a Japanese church at some point. There are times I think you went to Japanese church. Yeah, and in the 80s, Yuriko-san was going to leave, and then the pastor invited you to be an elder because the TUC pastor who was leaving here wanted you to stay. And Yuriko-san said that it felt like being on an executive board meeting of a company, the council, because if you look at the annual report for 86 and 87, the elders were employees, or many of them executives at Arthur Anderson, which I think later becomes Accenture, the consulting tax company, Caterpillar, DuPont, Ford, General Motors, IBM, Intel, Merrill Lynch, and Mobil, gas company, oil company. And there was a few teachers here and there, but then the majority of the session was all like business expats. And I guess there was you too. How was it being on session those days? And Yuriko was also teaching Japanese culture and tradition at TUC at Tokyo American Club during those years. And for 2 hours every Friday morning from 1986 to 2010, Yuriko taught a 10-week class to some 30 women at TUC, the Women's Society. And I think you told me you've had more than 1,000 students over the years, and you showed me like a big folder, I guess before the age of internet. You taught them how to live in Japan, how to meet places, how to get things done.
The Women's Society was so active and
Yeah.
such a wide variety of classes and things like that.
You taught out quilting classes,
Yeah, yeah,
so.
there and at the American Club.
And because you told me about your classes that it was fun, but it was a lot of work, and you put all your life into it. So thank you. Yeah, and then I talk about the Women's Society a little bit, because during these years, Women's Society membership really grows. It goes from 130 to 560 over the course of the 80s. And it's only in 1977 the Women's Society gets a vote in church council. So they kind of become more integrated into church in the late 70s and 80s. It really starts growing. The number of class offerings are reach 40. What kind of classes were there? Do you remember?
Cooking.
The cooking classes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jiro Hayashi's wife.
Oh.
It was like a celebrity chef or something, right? Yeah.
And Andre's cooking class, and there, I don't know, I mean, origami and chili and
Ikebana.
Ikebana was very popular.
Oh.
Yeah, in those days, Ikebana was really popular, wasn't it? All the different schools.
School, yeah, 4 different schools have kind of
Yeah.
competed with each other, which one gets.
Yeah,
Different
they had a
schools of Ikebana.
yearly show,
Right.
you know, of all the schools and lectures from different
Wow.
senseis.
Big Japanese
And I guess even before then too, have any of you seen this book? Buy it and try it. Do you have a copy?
I do that.
Yeah, it's from TUC. It's from the Women's Society, and this was like a bestseller in Japan. It was translated. It was a cookbook.
I might have it.
Yeah, a cookbook with recipes from TUC women.
Yeah, I might have that.
Yeah, and I think it went through multiple editions, translated into Japanese.
I think I'll look in my shelf.
Yeah, I think it just shows we're kind of like ambassadors of American culture in some ways. Go to American clubs, right? And it's like an American cookbook from foreign ladies in Tokyo.
Wow.
And they also gave a lot of money to the church and different organizations. In 1985, benevolence was more than 3 million yen to different organizations, and some to TUC also. And their activities included Bible studies, social gatherings, Lenten retreats. They organized a coffee hour between the Sunday services. They were making and delivering onigiri. Moon was kind of formally founded. And they were serving as a receptionist at the church lobby.
And we had big zodiac sales every year. That was a big event.
Yeah.
What sales?
Zodiac sale.
Zodiac sale?
Or anyway, I mean the sale.
The
When
bazaars,
people were-
or the
that
Christmas,
was-
and then.
And on the flea market.
Flea market,
Yeah,
that's
the flea
right.
market had a book sale.
Right.
Oh, boy, that really, that raised a lot of
The last
money
one was,
for mom too.
Yeah, flea market.
and the luncheon was a big thing too. I mean, you know, we had like, I think I guess like 100 people in the fellowship hall, and we have, lots of, not full course, but like that. So everyone really enjoyed. So the first Thursday of the month was Women's Society's big day.
Wow.
I think in those days, a lot of the foreign employees were top people, and the wives didn't have to work. So the wives were free for a lot of those activities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
one flea market to Pastor Steve Yamaguchi, who was an intern here in the 80s. Before he became a pastor here, he visited TUC in 2019. And he said just watching the flea market operate the same way that it did in the 1980s, in 2019, like made him feel at home. And
Yeah,
he still
yeah.
knows this church, he can come back, it will be the same in many ways. Jin Pangosio, who's in the Philippines now, she was also very involved in
Yeah.
Women's Society, and she says that
Very
Women's
active.
Society was pop. And she also pointed out that Women's Society had a large number of Japanese women before TUC opened its doors to Japanese people. And Thanksgiving and Christmas bazaars she loved.
When did TUC open its doors to Japanese people officially?
I think there were always like a few Japanese people
What does
at
that mean
TUC.
then? When they fully opened its doors to Japanese people?
But I think when Shinobu-san stopped playing bouncer at the door, it's kind of.
There's a moment actually in Church for All Seasons where Japanese students become members. I believe it was in the 60s, which was had to go through a vote, and there was kind of like a tacit policy, unnamed policy that didn't allow them.
It's interesting, if you go back one slide, I think it's one, it's hard, a little bit hard, it says a church home for English-speaking people
That's right.
on in the picture, so.
So basically, I think they required that the Japanese students, they were like Western enough because they studied abroad. So that was a necessary requirement.
So was there some kind of decision or making it well known that, okay, now our doors are fully open, that kind of thing? Is there?
Yeah, I can talk about that. There was a policy early on in the 20s that allowed it for it to happen, but then the great earthquake happened. A big, there was a huge rebuke by a really well-known Presbyterian minister that was like in the missions and saw like Kobe Union Church, talked about Yokohama Union Church and how they're doing really well, but Tokyo Union Church was just like a club for missionaries. So that was a big rebuke in the early 1900s. They decided to change, and then they didn't really hone in until they hired their first pastor, which I believe was in 50 something. And I think with that, that's when policy became more open, because it was very constrictive before, anytime before the first pastor came.
I guess when you have your first Japanese elder, that's it. Sometime before that, you would have that.
Correct.
I'm guessing there was Japanese male elder before that, the first female elder, I think. And in the 1930s, Sen Nishiyama, when he first comes to Japan, he gets permission from the council to start a ministry for Nisei, for the second generation Japanese Americans who have returned to Japan. And Yugo Nakada was an early music director. His father was Juicy Nakada, was considered.
Just by name, right?
Yeah, Juicy Nakada was like the Dwight Moody of Japan, a renowned evangelist of the Holiness Church. And Yugo Nakada becomes the music director at TUC. He was a renowned hymn writer and composer.
Right, when is that?
This was in, I think, 30s and 40s.
Okay.
And when the foreigners are kind of kicked out or detained during World War II, he kind of becomes like the de facto president of the church. So he's the one that operates the church while as Pastor Hector said, the church was mostly missionaries then. It was in the early 20th century. Warschauer's parents being like the prime examples, perhaps, of missionary families. So, yeah. And then I talk a little bit about June Gosra. It's fun to interview her. And she talks about how on her first Sunday at TUC in the 1970s, she was invited to lunch with 30 other young adults. And she stayed at TUC until 2021. She started at St. Albans and went to the Women's Society there, and she said she was the only unmarried person at the Women's Society, so the demographic was a little bit older there. Because she grew up Episcopalian, and then to us, and she kind of stuck with us. And she says and then this was in the 1970s. She said those were fun days, and then she can count 8 couples who met each other at TUC, just from that young adult group, single adult group. They call themselves SAG. It's a little bit sad. And she mentions that this is Pastor Rockledge on the right, and yeah, Jean says how Pastor Rockledge was a big papa to everyone. Now the Mass was always open for lunches and celebrations, especially for young adults. I think a tradition which you have continued. It was a young professionals potluck at Pastor Hector's last night.
Yeah, I found the very name, the Brumi. Howard Brumi-san was the chief designer for Tokyo Disneyland. And I was in the youth group once with Michiko Yaigashi-san. And I was personally invited by Mr. Brumi to come to the Tokyo Disneyland site. And I went there to the Chiba, Urayasu. There is only 4x4 office and their counter, reception counter, Mickey Mouse telephone. And upstairs in the second room is a designing room, and I saw the entire small scale Tokyo Disneyland. But outside is still vacant.
Wow.
2 years before, they built up everything. I remember very well. And once I went to visit Mr. Brumi in US, in California, Redwood area.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's showing around.
Wow. And Julie, your names too. Jean said there were like few families like the Buddhas and Brahmins who were kind of like became like parents to the young adults. And so I don't know if young adult group has like parents these days. So if any of you want to adopt them, I'm sure they will welcome it. And Jean ended up serving as an elder for outreach and mission. I think she was one of the young adult elders while most of the elders were older. And she also told me the story of one Christmas how young adults visited a House of Hope, which is a retirement community for Japanese ministers who are in their 90s, who are fairly elderly. And then these young adults brought osenbei, like Japanese rice crackers, as a gift. And they didn't realize that the pastors no longer have teeth, so they couldn't really eat it. But yeah, they still sang hymns and carols, and they ended up going back for spring break to show the retired pastors cherry blossoms. And so they did a lot of mission work, service work also. And then Jim and Catherine Triss, do you know the Trisses? Yeah, I think they were very involved in the 80s, 90s. They were at West Tokyo Union Church for a while too, and then kind of placed in both churches. And they met, they were one of the 8 couples that Jean mentioned. Jean first comes to Tokyo in 1976 to work for Mainichi Daily News as a journalist. And Catherine first arrives here in 1977 to teach at Tokyo Women's Christian University. And they meet at a new members luncheon at the men's. And Jim, Jim says he didn't really notice Catherine the first time they met because he had a Japanese girlfriend at the time. But they had one single adult Bible study at the home of a missionary. Jim said they kind of began to catch feelings because as they sang hymns, Jim discovered that she knew the same songs and cringed at the same hymns with bad theology that I found cringy. So that's how they started bonding, and they were long distance for 2 years because Jim was stationed in Singapore, and then somehow they made it work. And 1981, Good Friday, Jim comes back to Tokyo, and Catherine tells him that they're signed up for pancake breakfast at Easter 2 days later. And by Christmas, they're engaged, and by next summer, they have a wedding ceremony at TUC. And Yuriko-san, you organized the reception with the wedding.
With Elizabeth.
With Elizabeth.
Oh,
Suzuki.
right.
Suzuki. And Catherine said that it made sense to get married in Tokyo as we felt more connected to TUC than to any other church we've been part of. And then the picture on the left is Omotesando in the 1970s.
Right.
So that's what the street would have looked like when they first came here. And yeah, and Jim ends up serving as the elder for stewardship, and Catherine is the elder for Christian education. And I wrap up third chapter with a new building. I mean, the first book covers this in depth, but because it's something that our generation, it's an issue and question that our generation will have to figure out. And these days, within the next 5-10 years. So in 1977 January, TUC forms a building study committee. I mean, by the late 70s, the old building can't house everybody. There's overflow room downstairs, and that gets packed too. I mean, we toured there in the 70s, so we started talking about a new building, and 9 months later, the congregation was almost unanimous in approving rebuilding on the same site.
Yeah, they were talking about moving it to Ginza and all these other places. And, yeah,
But then, yeah,
everybody was so glad that it.
we stayed here. Okay. And the Hero too was one of the proposals that they,
Yeah.
Hero neighborhood also. And by the following May, the building committee presented detailed plans and costs, and there were 10 proposals for what a new building could look like. One of them was kind of by Edward Suzuki, who kind of grew up at TUC, and he went to Sunday school here, he was married here.
Right.
Studied architecture at Harvard, studied under, worked with Kenjo Tange,
Yeah.
who's a modernist architect. And he had this design, he loved the facade, the old facade of the church. So he wanted to keep that and then have like a more modern functional building behind it. And then because the church wasn't listening to it, he gives it to a local newspaper. And yeah, so he goes public with his design. And is not adopted, but then the pastor, McDowell, writes a response.
The morning started late.
2 years later to Edward, like, sorry, we couldn't do your design because it was too expensive, but we did consider it. And then among the 10 proposals, Nichimatsu Construction Company won the bid, and they came with an architect. So it's their design that was used. So that's what we have now. And in 1979, demolition began, and then construction, so we're on site for about a year. We had like 4 or 5 different places we worshiped at during that year, including Aoyama University and Aoyama High School. And I think what's interesting about that year in exile was that the membership remained about the same between 1979.
Great, that happens again. Whatever we do in the world.
Yeah, active local membership was it decreased a little bit from 310 to 301, and pledges actually increased during this year from 23 million yen to 29 million yen, which I think is impressive given that we had 5 different church homes in that year. And then Alums also donated $31,000 for the new sanctuary. So that ends chapter.
Can I ask you a question? This seems quite a radical, this style we have, this building, for the period. Was,
1980, yeah, I think so.
but were people, was that anything mentioned in the notes from anyone? Was that like controversial, or
Was
everyone said,
architecture
yeah, that's so
design?
interesting, or?
No, I haven't looked, I haven't discovered, I haven't read what you read the notes and how the people were responding to the
That's okay,
building.
never mind, I'll try to ask.
Well, I guess it would be interesting, like, out of the 10 bids, why did Bishimachi get selected?
What was the process?
Cheapest, interesting
Yeah.
design.
That's, I talked to the Mr. Edward Suzuki over the phone. Thank you very much for building a TUC building. Edward-san says, Murakami-san, I lost the bid, I failed the bid. And the Nishimatsu Construction won the bid because they are a construction company. Construction cost is included in the proposal, including the design and the stained glass. And Edward Suzuki waived his design fee to
Wow.
0 but still hire the construction company to do the work. So
That might be an interesting note.
he mentioned personally, that's maybe not the only reason, but
Thank you,
Yeah.
that's an important fact, like people like me would want to.
And then Nishimatsu Kensetsu, the owner, was a Christian. So I wonder, there is a Shiba Kyokai, Shiba Church is still exists, and next to the Shiba Church is Nishimatsu Kensetsu head office. So, they are not the ordinary construction company to make money. It's a Christian owner. So it's okay. I like this building, yes.
Yeah, and then I think there were maybe 3-4 different building chairmen in the 1979 and 1980 as we built this church, and I think at least one of them is still alive. I think we put me in touch with one of them.
We came to church.
Yeah, I reached out to him. I haven't heard back, but it'll be.
Okay.
I think it'll be interesting maybe to do an interview with him.
Yeah.
To find out as much as we can and
Yeah.
what were kind of the discussions that they were having. So, I mean, Brian does tell me. So Brian Cole was a young adult who was here in the 1980s. He does tell me how. After we built the building, we're so proud of the architecture and structure. We felt like it was a beacon of hope on the hill. And because a lot of tourists would come in for Oriental Bazaar, that was like the antique, famous antique shop. And I guess Toyland a little bit too. Toyland?
Kittyland.
Kittyland. Yeah, Kittyland.
They sell
It is though,
Yeah,
right.
Kittyland a little bit too. And
Right.
how the tourists would they would just wander in. I think it was pretty forward-looking for 1979, 1980.
Yeah.
It was before we had all this fancy architecture around. Russell did tell me that a lot of people come in thinking they were like a Spanish restaurant or something. Russell Gessling. Yeah, so Brian Cole gets here in 1981 as an English teacher. And then, any of you know Brian Cole? Yeah, I got introduced to him through this talking to some alums. He moved to Pasadena, California after. And then he moves to a Japanese luxury leather company, and he told me he was like the only foreigner at the company. And then so how for him, he says to be in a foreign country, you have to depend a lot more on your Christian faith to get you through the ups and downs of life. Being surrounded by other Christians sometimes made a difference between whether I could get through the week or not. So I think, TUC really was kind of a religious, cultural kind of community for him. It was like really an expat in his company. And and then he plugged into the single adult group also. And then he said they love to go to Maisen Tonkatsu after the service. I think these days the line would be too long. Last year, Japan got a record number of tourists. So any restaurants on weekends here, we're not gonna find a place for lunch. It was possible back then to Maisen after church, and they went on a lot of mission trips and outings to places like Disneyland. And they also had a lot of dinners at each other's homes. And then the young adults would go caroling around with the Santo during Christmas. And he told me about, so Women's Society used to have these fundraiser dinners. And one of our guests was Sada Watanabe, who's a renowned Japanese poet. Were you there when he came and gave a talk?
My husband bought that print,
Yeah.
and then there was a battle over it because so
That elaborate among who?
the print that he bought and gave to the church. My husband had already bought it, and so there was a small battle over who could have it.
Yeah, there were some of his prints in the lobby, in the narthex,
Yes.
in the church office.
It was out here in the hallway.
Can you later point out to us which one he bought and donated to the church? I'd like to know that. Can you point out to us, do you remember which print among all the what?
Yeah, it had been out in this hallway for some time. It's a good size print. And we have the second one.
Yeah.
And no space on our wall to put it anymore.
Right. And then Brian told me how he got the artwork when it was cheap, and how it's like a lot more expensive now. And Sen Nishiyama was actually the translator of the Women's Society when the Watanabe gave a talk. Just zooming out a little bit, the beginning of chapter 4, I begin by talking a little about the Showa era, which runs from 1926 to 1989. And he was the longest ruling, and this was him in 1920s, and this is him in 1980s. So when he passed away, he was the longest ruling emperor in Japanese history, and he had also been the longest ruling monarch in the world. 26 to 89 is more than 60 years, is a long time. And then I think he kind of provided stability. There was so much turbulence in Japanese 20th century history. And he oversaw the post-war Japanese reconstruction. I mean, I don't know how involved he was in the day-to-day politics, but just him being like a symbolic head kind of provided continuity. And in 1980, Japan overtakes the US as the world's leading automobile manufacturer. And by 1989, by some estimates, maybe you lived through this period, the value of real estate in Tokyo alone was worth more than the entire US.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I've also heard during this time the value of real estate of the Imperial Palace was more than entire California. And so,
But it didn't appreciate, that was the difference. My brother-in-law who bought a house, it never appreciated. It was like the same price when he sold it as when he bought it. I'll have to get that information.
Between what? Between when and when?
Probably the 90s till last year.
Yeah,
Right.
last decades.
The last
decade.
decade.
And there's the...
But just to put it in, it was real for a person, you know.
Yeah, last decade.
Yeah, and then by the time the Crown Prince Akihito becomes Heisei Emperor in 1990, the bubble had burst, and then you get the onset of the last decade that you were talking about, Catherine. And then from the peak of almost 40,000 yen in 1989, the Nikkei index of the Tokyo Stock Exchange halves to about 20,000 in a year. And then by 1992, it's a third of what it was at its peak. So Heisei Emperor, right? It's not his fault when he becomes the emperor, and then things, the economy kind of starts going down for Japan. But I don't think the economy affected church as much directly, though. I don't think the expats community that was the majority of the membership at the time were affected as much by the bubble bursting. And then I bring in Gene Wilson during this time too, because Gene Wilson arrived at TUC in 1980. And Michiko a little bit too. Initially, Gene just visits for worship on Sundays, and she just leaves right after. But she told me how joining a Bible study. There were a lot of Bible studies at TUC during those years, and one was before the service began. They met on the second floor of Kawaii, the piano building next door, because all the rooms here were taken with buildings, and that really just gave her a community to, oh, we have a preacher. Good morning. And then that kind of gave her a community. That was kind of her foot in the door at TUC, the Bible study group. And then she starts getting interested in prayers, and then joins the prayer group at TUC also. And she told me how prayer is like scaffolding. Prayer is what holds people up while I'm working on. This is what she heard from God. Prayer is like scaffolding. Prayer is what holds people up while I'm working on the inside. I think that's a good metaphor for what prayer is. And then she founds TUC's Prayer and Healing Ministry in 1999. And I think from about 2014, and then this group hosts the biannual prayer and healing service. So she teaches, so from 1990s, Jean starts teaching a lot of classes at TUC, including one on spiritual gifts. After reading this book, she taught a class on the 7 spiritual gifts based on the spiritual gifts that are listed in Romans 12. prophecy, service, teaching, exhortation, giving, leading, and mercy. And then she told me, nothing gives me more joy than teaching, encouragement, and cheerleading. So exhortation was her spiritual gift. And then in 1990, she got the entire congregation to take spiritual gifts tests to understand if you took it. And even last year, she taught a class on spiritual gifts, so she continues doing that. And Michiko, who started coming here as a student at Aoyama Gakuen, she's been here since the 70s and 80s. And then she's taken G's classes on prayer, spiritual gifts, Holy Spirit, demons and angels. So she's been a big student of G's. And then joined the prayer and healing ministry also. And Michiko told me at first I was hesitant to pray for others, and I heard good feedback from others. Little by little, God raised my prayer power. That's been her experience. Michiko ends up serving as an elder of spiritual formation, and Jean ends up serves an elder 3 times, I think, in various roles.
And when you fly to Narita and get on the train to Tokyo, it's Gene Wilson's voice you hear. It's
Yeah, I think, or did you mention that anywhere? Because I think that's good.
That's
People who attend, you go out, it always brings you back to TUC.
Right.
I'm always like encouraged and I'm like, oh, God is with me.
It's so
right.
refreshing.
Even the Kabukiza translation is by Jean, long time ago.
Oh yeah,
She's still working with Kabukiza.
Yeah, the couple.
Well, she translated.
Oh wow.
She translates it into English, and she used to have her voice when they had the voice things,
Right.
which was amazing.
She once was an interpreter for Kitajima Saburo. He's a very, very famous Japanese singer. I didn't know that until I heard it.
Yeah, she's so modest about everything. She's so much.
Yeah. But I think it is worth mentioning that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Good.
You talk about Sen Nishiyama being a translator for Millennium
Apollo.
I
Right.
don't see why that could
Oh,
be.
Right, because it affects us more every day.
It would be interesting to.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I guess
for sure.
with all the advising Wally did for Japanese railways also,
Yeah.
I feel
Oh,
like
yes,
we should
yes.
get like discount. or something. Yeah, I wonder if she gets a discount on Shinkansen. If you, or like a lifetime free ride or something.
Yes,
They're
yes.
pretty cheap
If
when
you
they're in
give,
Japan.
if you give
About
your,
those
if
things.
you give your voice, yeah. And then I talked about one of my former advisors. So this was actually the first interview I did before coming to TUC. So yeah, Dr. Young was my advisor before he retired
Oh,
on me.
really?
And then
Ah.
I was an orphan and Dr. Cotter stepped up. So thank you, Dr. Cotter, for taking me on. So Richard and Ellison Young were a big part of the Christian education at TUC in the 1980s. And he was a professor at Meiji Gakuen, and then veteran teacher at TUC Adult Education. He taught classes on Christianity in Japan and then Japanese religions. And he also taught a class on Shusaku Endo, who wrote the novel Silence.
Yeah.
And he lived down the street in Harajuku. And then he's given multiple talks at TUC, including to Women's Society.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, women's.
You remember Shusaku Endo
Yes.
coming here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. How was he? He doesn't speak much English, right? Was Sen Nishiyama the translator, interpreter when he came? Yeah.
He was a-
Wow, so Sen did a lot of interpreting in Women's Society. So, and then Richard told me doing these courses were fun because they gave me an opportunity to share things that I learned that I wasn't able to teach in university. So his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania was in South Asian religions. But at university, you pretty much have to, you can only teach what you're trained in. But at TUC, you could teach whatever you wanted. And he also had a close relationship with, what's his name, Daimler Brown. He was a famous historian of early Japan at UC Berkeley. And after he retired, you remember Daimler Brown?
Yeah. So he was an elder when Catherine and I were also members. And we lived in the same area. Delma lived in Ogikubo. We Catherine and I lived in Kichijoji. So we got together and we had dinner at her house. Dan was really very interesting person.
Yeah, he was one of the leading scholars of pre-modern Japan. And he was an editor for this Cambridge series on the history of Japan, and it's its first part, early modern Japan. And yeah, he was the head of TUC Center of Education. It's kind of the caliber of professors.
Oh, please come back.
He might have passed away.
Yeah, passed away.
I'm just saying, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I think he lived till like 102 and 103 or something. He lived a long time. And Council notes July 1990, in anticipation of the session of the Heisei Emperor, Richard Young has volunteered to offer a class on the enthronement process in Japan over 3 Sunday evenings. And then I was wondering, do people come back to TUC for the classes in the evening? Right? And I think when we got the last emperor, was it 2019? When was it that the current emperor ascended to the throne? Was it around 2019?
For Reiwa?
Yeah.
Reiwa's like 7 years now, so.
Year 7. Okay, so it was around 2019. Yeah, I don't think we had anybody who could teach a class like that on the enthronement process in Japan, but I think that just speaks to kind of all the. Maybe Richard could, maybe Rich Gardner could teach a class on something like that if we asked him. And then in 1995, there was this terrorist attack in Tokyo by the followers of Shinrikyo, the new religious movement. And that gave Richard an opportunity to teach about the new religious movements in Japan, and how. And Richard talks about how that was his time in the limelight, because he had done some research on new religious movements, and then after that, everybody was curious about. How like everybody's curious about evangelicals in America today after Trump.
Yeah.
So that's why Dr. Carter's having his moment in the limelight. He's studying evangelicals. And he says Richard told me teaching on Japanese religions was interesting because a lot of them are driven by syncretism, kind of mix of different traditions. So they draw that incorporated elements of Christianity. So a lot of them have Christian elements. And then he also said several new Japanese religions have extravagantly built headquarters and other temples in Protestando. There was just one down the street behind the Christian Science temple. I just thought they just demolished it. But that was one so that was one of the major new religious movements. And I think for them, having Protestando address gives them legitimacy. That they kind of made it and they can afford to have a site here. And Ellison was kind of a power couple. They were joint elders of Christian education. I think back then we had some like husband and I don't know if we still do, but there was some husband and wife joint elders like that.
They would share the vote.
Oh, so they had to get one.
Oh, that was true then?
Yeah.
Oh,
So the 2 people, 1 vote.
wow, where did you find that
It's in the
information?
council. I remember, I also talking with Russell Destin, and he also shared a vote back in the day.
Oh, interesting.
I see. So yeah, while Richard was, they were married in college, but they've been a couple for a long time. While Richard was teaching adults, Ellison was overseeing kind of a Sunday school. And I talk about preschool next, I think, but I don't think we have time today, so I'll end here. And Ellison mentions how in a March 1990 council meeting that each week about 275 people participated in the church's 6 Christian education programs.
270.
75 people
Okay,
participated.
can we all pray for that now? We need to pray for that because Pastor Lydia is leading us in these small groups. So I believe with prayer we can ramp it up.
No, we're already getting busier after you came. Something every Sunday now. That wasn't the case. So, yeah, we have a class every Sunday after.
Yeah, but we have a ways to go to 270, let's just say.
That are the same people, right?
Yeah, I think I'll wrap up here today. Any questions or comments about what I've covered?
just to so this goes up to what year? These 90s?
This is kind of 1990s.
Mm.
So I think some of these chapters I kind of write 2 decades, but with like one overlapping decade. So I think chapter 3 was like the 70s and 80s, and then chapter 4 is like 80s and 90s. And then working with 2 decades kind of helps me write more thematically, because a decade can be a little choppy.
So this is 80s and 90s?
And 90s.
So up to like
But
2000.
chapter 5 would be 90s and 2000s. So I kind of have
Ah, okay, so
overlapping.
90s.
And sometimes I'm not as bound by those decades. But do kind of back and forth. I think for the coherence of narrative, it kind of helps. For the flow, it kind of helps to cover a longer period and then have some overlaps.
Would you say there's anything that you know that changed within the church's practices in this decade right here?
Church practice?
Policy, different directions, you know, like we talk about with, Barry, we did all of these trips and we, the congregation went many places in sort of an evangelical, his version of evangelical, but, Pastor Johan, we turned a lot of our resources back on Japan. We said, let's give more to Japan than outside, that would be then a shift from our various.
Yeah, same thing.
Are there any things that stand out in this decade?
In the...
I would think observation, that the first Japanese elder, it was one, and then fully open, and then the whole women's society was massive back then.
Yeah, women's society, I think Christian education was massive. I mean, like, preschool was huge.
And you've already
Yeah,
covered
right.
all those things quite
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
I also, I now remember, there have been lots of talk about young people's activities in the area we have covered.
Young
But
adult
also
was-
I enjoyed one thing which wasn't, I think, which hasn't been mentioned. We did a couple of progressive dinner for adults and couples, and that was fun. And maybe that was during the McDowell's and early Fenwick's, and the couples got to know, each other and became
Closer.
Mhm.
The youth did that when I was in Elder too. We did progressive dinners for kids.
What does progressive dinner mean?
Appetizers here, main there, dessert there. You go from one neighborhood to the next
So
neighborhood.
that we did that.
Mingle each other.
Right.
Oh, good.
Wow.
So the journey is part of the evening.
Yeah, that's cool. Wow. Yeah, you can bring it back. You're the president. You can make it happen.
It's also it's such a big city,
Yeah.
and it's all spread.
I
but
can't
it's
cover
right.
all the area.
Yeah.
Stretch too thin.
I actually need to go to UPT.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He's like, you need to go to UPT too, right?
No, I listen to them.
You listen to him? Okay, yeah. I don't know if Randy needs me to play bass today, so I have to go talk to my boss, but thank you so much again
Thank
for
you.
coming.